Today's guest is Sam Sethi, and he is the CEO and founder of TrueFans, a podcast platform that is not only a player, but is literally re-engineering the consumption, monetization, and growth of podcasts. Now, many of you who are fans of this show and maybe also avid consumers of podcasts in general don't often seem to know how much work goes into it or are so used to a podcast only being monetized through ads. Problem with that is many of us hope to skip them as soon as possible. And if it's a bad ad, whether it's one of those cheesy, corny ones or read by the host, but simply not interesting to you, well, what do? You might never listen to the show again, or you might give them a pass and just fast forward over to the actual meat and potatoes of the show, right? Now, that's nice of you to give them a pass, but why is it something that we ourselves continue to put up with? That's what Sam set out to figure out. And not only that, he also poses the question, why is it that music, books, courses, movies, you name it, everything has a subscription and we're happy to pay for that. But the minute it comes to podcasting, we'd rather that be free when some of them are actually quite good and a lot of production goes into it. Understandably, there are also others that are not quite good. And maybe there's a standard we can be setting for that to start to take shape. But in the meantime, the interesting things that Sam has been doing with people behind the scenes, big players, some of the original players who have launched podcasting as a whole, have developed a flexible wallet that's going to unlock the way podcasts and possibly all content in the future is monetized, which is probably putting all advertisers on edge if this were to gain traction. But it would be the most impactful way for fans, listeners, and supporters to actually change the game. Because even if advertisers were to be against this, they're actually included in the plan and can get direct ROI in this strategy, as opposed to waiting on these magical impressions that we're not really sure was an entire listen. And did they listen to the podcast? Did they listen to the ad? Did they skip the ad? We don't have to go very far to know exactly how many people skip ads. We do it all the time, myself included. But enough from me. I want you to hear it from Sam himself. And he was kind enough to speak to me on this recorded line on his time. And he's out there in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. And so give a round of applause and strap in for an amazing episode you're about to hear on the nuts and bolts of the industry as a whole. Without further ado, Sam Sethi of TrueFans. Man, what a pleasure. I feel very fortunate to have you here. Sam, welcome to the War Room. It really is an absolute pleasure to have you here. I think the listeners are in for a treat.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, no, hopefully so.
Yeah. Just a little background for those who are listening. I got a chance to witness Sam in action. He was a panelist at Podcast Movement here in Los Angeles recently, but that isn't his first rodeo. This guy's been around. He's been around the block a few times. And so when I was thinking like, where could I start a conversation? I thought maybe even being able to start with what I saw you talk about. And then from there, add some context about, where you came from, what you're doing, but just to lay the groundwork down, what I saw from you. I saw you up there with a bunch of panelists who were pushing for advertising and programmatic ads and all the things that we know podcasting to have as their only option for monetization. And what I loved was you sat there and you said, that's all great, but we've tried it. I actually believe there's another way. The minute I saw that
Yep.
happen, I said, there's a dissenting voice. So I'd love to hear how you got there and if TrueFans.fm, which you're the CEO of, is part of that journey.
Sure. Let's start off with what I said. So I've looked at advertising for a little while in the podcast industry, and I've called it the emperor's new clothes. Basically, the emperor's naked, but we keep believing or telling him that he's fully clothed, and no one wants to say anything. It's the same with advertising. So we all do it, right? Oh yeah, put some ads in your podcast. People will be listening, and the advertiser's great. How many downloads have you got? Oh, I've got 10,000. And then it's like, Well, actually, Apple tells us that you only got half of those because we've cut you off at the knee. Okay, 5,000. I've still got 5,000. How many of those are actually listeners? Well, maybe a third of those actually listen because there's still auto downloads in there. Okay, well, that's okay. We're still good. And I'll still give you your advertising money. And then you go, okay, well, advert one, how many people listen to my advert? Oh, well, I can't tell you that. We just have no metrics to track that. What do you mean you have no metrics? Well, we don't know if somebody listened, how long they listened, and whether they skipped, right? But take my word for it, they listened. Okay, advert two. How did you get on? Again, we can't tell you anything about it, but please believe us that the advert was listened to. And so this goes on and on and on. It's this total belief system that we've put out there that, hey, Mr. Advertiser, pay us some money because downloads equals listens, which they do not at all. And by the way, listens can't be measured. So we've gone and said to the industry, just trust us, something's happening. And now we're beginning to reveal that actually it's not actually going the way that we want it to go. And advertisers are beginning to get savvy. They're beginning to go, hang on a minute. I want to know a bit more about my dollar. Where's it being spent? How's it being spent? Who's hearing this? What's my return on this investment? Where are we getting the listener, return? And it's not happening. And so we keep perpetuating these ideas of dynamic ad insertions, host read ads. These are all great ways to make money. But the reality is, as I did in the room, when you ask the actual listeners, put your hands up if you skip the ad, everyone put their hands up, right? You were there, right? You
Yeah,
saw it.
everyone put their hand up,
Right. So
me
even,
included.
yeah. So even if you convince the advertiser that the ad was heard, even if you convince the advertiser that there is an audience, fundamentally, we, the audience, all admit secretly or openly now that we skip the ads anyway. And why do we skip the ads? Because there's nothing of value in it for us. We're not getting paid any money to listen to that ad. We're not getting any value. Half the ads are non specific ads to the content I'm listening to. So that, it might be a mattress ad or it might be a food ad and I'm listening to something about technology. It's not even related to the content that I'm listening to. So it's not surprising that I go skip, 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 right back to the audience, back to the creator, back to the podcast. So let's hear what he's got to say or she's got to say, right? So if we know all of that to be true, then as far as I'm concerned, advertising, scam is a hard word, but I'd say it's a hard belief, right? It's a hard belief.
Right. It's coming after the advertiser's pocket
Yeah.
and the listener's time and attention, right? Which isn't being respected due
Yep.
to poor programmatic advertising. I can see what makes you so fired up about this. I'm just curious because everyone else seems to be okay with it. Is it just because, this is really what I thought I saw in the room, where
Mm.
these major platformers who host podcasts and are involved in advertising, that's their bread and butter. So hearing a dissenting opinion is almost like, hey, don't mess with my pocket, right? But I also am glad that someone said that because the truth is, it's not like I don't even know if YouTube videos with their view time can be accurately assessed. Is this why you're so full of advocacy for this? Is it because you yourself want to see the industry grow?
I want to see the industry grow. I want to see us deliver better metrics. So instead of downloads, I want to see time listened as a metric, right? Not for just advertising, but for the podcast creator. I want to know if someone's listening to my podcast, how long did they listen to my podcast? Where did they drop off?
Yeah.
That is measurable today by all podcast apps. Apple has it, Spotify has it, TrueFans has it, right? We know that data. So we can share that with creators, but Apple and Spotify aren't so open to sharing that with you.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
That's the most transparent metric one could ever possibly hope to have. What it would do for podcast creators in terms of the time they spend creating things, knowing that they only have this much. I mean, it would open doors. You're telling me, because I was always curious, they're not willing to share that. Can we get it from the hosting platforms themselves?
Well, the hosting platforms don't have it because remember, once you've actually streamed or
Right.
downloaded the actual podcast, it's the app that is now serving that to the listener.
Mm.
So the host has no control over that. It's the apps that have that. Look, I have a podcasting app. I know how long anyone listens to any one episode. And what we do in True Fans is we aggregate that for the creator. So if 100 people listen to this podcast, I could then tell you each one of those 100 people, I could tell you where they dropped off. So time listened and percent completed, right? Now you would get a nice chart, a dashboard, whatever one you want, and it will show you the cliff. Now the cliff might be the end, right? You may be the one lucky man in the world who gets 100% to the end for everyone. Well done, you. But the reality, and we all know the reality, right, is that people are fast forwarding certain sections. They're skipping little bits here. They drop off at the end. You know, that nice bit where you always go, oh, and, you know, by the way, here's my last sponsor. Let me read it out to you. And everyone's going, yeah, whatever, Philip, we're out of here, you know. So the reality is we know where things drop off. So what I want to do and what others want to do, I'm not alone. James Cridland from Pod News, you know, Dan Meisner from Bumper, they were all talking about timed listened is the new metric that the industry needs to focus around, not downloads, not anything else, time listened. Now, when you take time listened, now it still doesn't fix the advertising problem that I was talking about on stage, because as I said, time listened, I get to the ad, I skip the ad, I still keep listening to your podcast. So the advertiser hasn't got any value. Now, there is a model coming along that I'll explain in a minute if you want, that does give 100% accuracy to the advertiser and rewards the listener for their time and their attention.
I'm all ears. Seriously,
Okay.
please break it down.
So a couple of years ago, well, okay, I'm going to rewind 20 years. I used to be the Netscape product manager. And one of the things that Mark Andreessen did, my boss, obviously came up with the browser, came up with, you know, HTTP, URLs, all that good stuff. But what he never did was create a micro payment system for the web. So we had PayPal and we had Stripe and we had all these lovely payment gateways, but they were all what I call macro payments, right? You know, $1 was the minimum and upward beyond. So the way that we gave sentiment feedback to creators was, hey, thumbs up, heart, I love you. Yeah. You know, and that was the metrics that for a while the industry chased, you know, marketeers, I've got 1 million likes, I've got 1,000 follows, right? But you try and take that to the bank and get a mortgage or get a car, bank manager's looking at you go, I don't think that has any value. What do you mean it's got no value? That's really good. Lots of people love me, right? Well, so what? But they're not paying you. So in the absence of any micro payment, we added advertising around content as the way to monetize the content. And that's why in Web 2.0, you saw advertising everywhere was the primary focus. And we have it in podcasting today. Now, fast forward, call it Web3, call it whatever you want. A couple of years ago, Bitcoin came out and there was a micro payment element. 100 millionth of a Bitcoin is called a SAT. The SAT stands for Satoshi, the guy who invented Bitcoin.
Right.
So now, you know, Philip, I could now, with micro payment apps like True Fans, like Fountain, like Podverse, like Podcast Guru, I could, you know, instead of giving you that heart or a like, I could give you 100 sats, 1,000 sats. 1,000 sats might be 5 cents. So they're small incremental amounts of money, but they're real money. In the aggregate, if you've got 100 people giving you 50 cents for, you know, the show, the episode, you know, that could earn up to $5, $10, right? Which is actually better than the CPM rate you'd probably get from the advertising. So there is there's going to be a crossover point. It might not be 100, it might be 150 at a slightly higher pay rate that gets you the $24 CPM rate that you would be looking for from an advert. So basically we're in that moment where advertising for most podcasts, it isn't even achievable because they haven't got the size of audience. But if you have got that side of audience, you've got 1,000 people. Oh yeah, the average from Libsyn's advertised cost is $22, right? For 1,000 CPMs. Most people won't qualify for that. Not in the, you know, small to medium sized business, not in the long tail of the podcast industry. So fast forward to today. What we're looking at now is a capability for having a digital wallet. So you could have one and I can have one, and it's a peer-to-peer payment system. So you're the creator of the podcast. I'm listening to your podcast and I'm streaming you sats, 100 sats per minute. And then in the middle of it, you say something amazing. And I use the word boost. It's a comment with a payment. So I go, hey, Philip, I love what you just said. Here's another 100 sats with a comment. Or I zap you, which is a like with a comment. So these are just new terminologies that you're going to have to just get used to, right? Just as we got used to the words HTTP, URL, and www. Fast forward, we have digital wallets, sats, micropayments, zaps and boosts and streams. So that's the new vocabulary that we're all going to have to get used to. But let's see what you can do with that now. So now I've got that micropayment system. I'm streaming money to you. You're earning money. Happy days. Step one. Step two, with TrueFans, we created something called negative sats. And just bear with me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Negative sats changes the flow. So instead of me paying you, you now pay me. Well, why would me as the creator pay you, the listener? So you've got a brand new podcast. You've got the trailer. Episode 1 hasn't dropped yet. You want to get the word out there. So you drop your trailer and you put negative sats, and then you're encouraging people to listen to your trailer and paying for their time and attention. You're saying, hey, look, it's not massive. It's 3 minutes. I'm going to pay you 10 sats per minute. So probably 5 cents in dollars terms. And, you know, I know it's not a lot, but I'm giving you a little bit of sentiment for your time and attention. So please listen to my podcast trailer. If you like it, subscribe to my show, maybe tell your mates. So negative sats was something we invented last year. Moving one step forward. So now Adam Curry, the inventor of podcasting last June, July, has always wanted to be able to play music inside a podcast. Now, if you try and play anything from Sony BMG, good luck. Take down, take down, take down. So a lot of music artists on Spotify and Apple are realizing, independent music artists, they're not getting any money from those platforms. You know, I think Spotify has put now 1,000 plays before you actually get any money, you know, as a small artist. So they have now realized, hang on a minute, this thing called RSS. Oh, I know I can put my content into RSS. So it could be an album where you have a podcast and you can have an episode and it's now a track. Same analogy, same delivery mechanism, same audio. So now we're seeing music, we're seeing training courses, we're seeing audio books, we're seeing films. All of these are being put into RSS. And so now, you know, as a fan of any of those content owners, I can pay them a little bit. Some of them I don't pay because, you know, I just want to consume, it's free. And others I will pay because, you know, I want to support you. I don't want pod fade. I want you to keep going. Okay, so we've got to the stage where Adam last summer created a piece of technology called wallet switching. Just bear with me for a sec. So the idea was Adam put out a show and he was being the MTV jock that he was from his original days. And so he was talking, hey, love this song, wait for it. You play the song, comes back, starts talking again, plays the next song, starts talking again, plays the next song. Wallet switching was I was streaming to his show called Boostergram Ball, which is the name of the podcast. And all the money was going from me to his wallet. But the minute the artists played, the money switched from going to his wallet to the artist's wallet. And then the minute the music stopped, it switched back to Adam. Now, I didn't have to do anything as a listener. The technology did that for me, right? So that's what we call wallet switching, the ability for me to stream in to the podcast owner, but the minute the music plays, it switches to their wallet, and then the minute the music finishes, it switches back to the creator. So that was step 3, and that's working. And these are called music casts, and you can go and find music casts, you know, on many platforms, right? And there's some really good ones out there. Phantom Power Music, and there's a website called WAV Lake, WAV Lake, where you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of new music artists. There's another one called LM Beat. So this is an underground thing that's happening, but except that what wallet switching allows us to do is to mix content into another podcast and then move the monies from one wallet to another. And this is the final bit then, Philip. So now you're listening to a podcast and an ad appears. Now, we said earlier that the ad you would skip it. Well, now, if we can reverse the flow of money, the advertiser has a budget, you're listening to the advert, you go, The advertiser goes, you know what, Sam, instead of you paying to listen to this podcast, stop. We, the advertiser, will now pay you to listen to our ad. So the money flows back to them. So now you're valuing my time and attention. So, okay, I will give you my time and attention and I will listen to your ad while you pay me. Now, because it's programmable money, we can split the advertising money between the podcast creator, you, let's say the person serving the ad, and me, the listener. So you might take 80% of the revenue coming from the advertiser and I get 20%, whatever. You can play around with your percentages. But because I'm being paid to listen to the ad, I'm willing to give it some time. Now, I get 10% through the ad, like, crap ad, I'm not listening to this anymore. And I fast forward. Still have that option to do that. Somebody else who's listening to your podcast where the ad's being served goes, no, I'll give it 50% of my time. And then the third person, maybe 100% of the time. So now what's the metric that goes back to the advertiser? If we take those three examples, time listened, 10%, 50%, sorry, 10 minute, 10%, 50%, 100%, right? So it might be 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. The advertiser knows exactly how long you listen because the minute you stop listening, they stop paying. And they know exactly from their marketing budget how much they spent on actual listeners. This isn't sort of, let me throw a check at you and hope someone listened. This is, I have a budget and I know exactly how long you listened and I know exactly how much money I paid you. And so the listener is saying, I'm willing to give you my time and attention and you're willing to pay me for it. The creator, the podcaster, is happy because they're splitting the revenue from the advertising with their listeners. And everyone's a win-win-win. And that's the model that we're moving to. But it takes a bit of time to get there.
I think it makes sense. It's really well thought out, and I can see how the flexible wallet, the wallet switching, was the unlock for this
Yes.
opportunity. And what I love about it most too is that the minute someone commits to even giving you 5 cents, it shows a buyer signal,
Yeah.
right? Which is the all important thing. Is that's different from a like. It costs nothing to like.
No.
People will be a lot more choosy about what they do. Right now, this is interesting because if you look at let's say a tangential platform like X and what they're trying to do with charging for verification, but then there's these other tiers and what have you. A lot of people were against the idea, but then the minute that X did it, other social networks started charging for this verification to allow. So they had never had the audacity to ask for that. And in exchange, it protects your data, what have you. Was there any inspiration from that? And do you think there is a place? Because I want to point out, you also asked, like, how many of you are willing to actually charge your listeners to listen to the podcast? And I didn't see very many hands go up.
That's because what are the two models? I will not charge you and I'll stick adverts in my content, and that's how I monetize. Or I'll remove the ads and I'll put a subscription paywall in the way. And most people get not willing to do that. This third model is pay as you go. So you have pay me up front subscription, pay me nothing but be interrupted, or hang on a minute, pay me what you want to listen to the content and value my content based on how you see me. And that pay as you go model is the model, I think, not just for podcasting, but I think it's going to be the model that we see. Now, look, I've got teenage children, right? And their friends, and a lot of them, Netflix, Paramount, Apple TV, right?
Yeah.
Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. But what they're doing now, they're getting savvy. What they're realizing is they watch, let's say, a series, and then they'll unsubscribe because they don't want to pay for something that they're not getting value from. Because after they've seen the one thing they wanted, it's probably going to be a month, 2 months, 3 months for the next thing they really want. So they're unsubscribing. And so this behavior of paying for what you consume and then unsubscribing, well, we've replicated that now with micropayments where you can pay per minute for what you consume. So I think what you will see is more and more people, the pennies will start to drop. People will be, oh, this is really easy to do. And oh, I'm only paying for what I get. Right. I love that. No problem. So subscriptions are not a great model. If they were a great model, by the way, Apple would be shouting about it everywhere. You promised me, Apple marketing would be like, hey, we've got hundreds of thousands. Now, there's a story in the press today, which I'll be covering tomorrow, is that Apple are favoring those people who've taken out a subscription and they're promoting them on the front page of Apple Podcasts in the new and noteworthy. So 6 of the 10 in the new and noteworthy are being promoted by Apple if you take a subscription. But if you haven't got a subscription, they won't promote you. So,
Wow.
there's some dark, dodgy things going on. And I just think this whole industry is fundamentally, there are major things that are wrong and there are major things that are right. The wrong is all the advertising as it currently stands. The major things that are right, there are brilliant, brilliant podcasts, and each podcast has got its micro audience. You don't have to have 1,000 people. You can have 100, you can have 50, you can have 20, right? If you stuck 20 people in a room in front of you that listened to every word you had to say, you'd still be happy, right? And if each one of those gave you $1, you'd be a very happy man. Now, this all comes from a really brilliant blog post written probably a decade or so ago from a guy called Kevin Kelly, and it was called 1,000 True Fans. And he said,
Right.
in the days when people were chasing follows and likes, he said, look, forget that. Just get 1,000 people to pay you £10 a month. That's 100,000 business. So ergo, why I call my business True Fans.
Now, is this all, I have one fundamental question I wanted to make sure I asked.
Hmm.
Is this all driven by cryptocurrency?
It is, because why wouldn't we do fiat currency, right? And
Right.
the problem is,
Securities,
no,
third
it's not
parties.
really. No, I can't get below a single dollar, or a single pound, or a single euro.
Right.
Right. So
Transaction fees, etc.
yes, if I want to pay you 100 sats per minute or 10 sats per minute, well, that's a 0.1 cent, right? So that small micro payment is not possible. And even if I could get it down to, let's say, $1 or below a
Right.
dollar, the payment gateway provider, Apple Pay
Has to make
or
their 50
Stripe.
cents.
Yeah, so so happy days. You're trying to support the podcast creator, and guess what? Apple or the other payment gateway providers are taking half the money or a third of the money. So to avoid all of that sort of problem, we went down the micropayments route. Now, we're not alone. There are hundreds of apps out there that are using micropayments. It is seen as the digital currency of the web. And I've been in the industry long enough. I was there when, imagine this, Philip, the first browsers. How do you get a browser? Well, you can't go online to get a browser because you need a browser to get a browser, right? So
Right.
you had to have, in the early days, the geeks had to go and get a computer magazine that had a floppy disk on the front that contained the browser that you put in your laptop. You had to load the TCP/IP protocol stack because that wasn't in the operating system. So you loaded the stack, loaded the browser. Then when you got online, HTML1 was not great. Let me promise you, there was no CSS. So web pages looked pretty rubbish. And then even when you got to the web page, there was no search engine. So you imagine you've strived to get online to this thing called the web, and you've been told that's going to be the future, and you get there and it's a gray screen with some white text and a couple of flashing boxes, and you're going, seriously, Sam, you said this was the future. I think you're mad. Fast forward today, when I say the future is micropayments, it's digital wallets, it's peer-to-peer, direct-to-fan payments. And, I get a lot of people going, no, I can't see it. Can't see it. It's too complex. I don't understand what you're doing. And slowly but steadily, we will overcome some of the more complex terminology, and people will understand it, and then they'll see the value in it, and then we'll get that momentum kick. I don't know when it could be. 6 months
Right.
from now, 3 months from now, a year from now. No idea.
Infrastructure is necessary to be developed. I mean, I came in around the web TV days. I don't know if you remember that one
Yeah.
with Philips Magnavox, but that was my first foray. And I still had a computer with a big floppy, but it was mostly for like computer games. I was fortunate enough to have that as a kid, but I knew that not everyone did. No one
Yeah.
definitely had web TV. That was pretty rare. It was like smart TVs before smart
Yeah.
TVs. So you're right. Been a huge difference from GeoCities to where we are today. And Netscape, honestly, I was a fan of the browser, but yeah, it came pre-installed on my Windows 98 or what have you.
Yeah.
So big difference. And you're right. We just have to wait because one thing I had always had trouble with Web3 was that there is this big learning curve, right? Which isn't necessarily user friendly, but like you're saying, uh, with Curry, he actually developed a technology stack to facilitate that infrastructure. So slowly but surely, we're taking steps forward to make that happen.
Yeah, so you got it straight away. It was the wallet switching that was the game changer. But before the wallet switching, we had to get the first bit of the puzzle, what was the micropayment. We had to get the
Yeah.
wallets. Then we had to build on that with the ability to track per second payments. Then we got music to be independent. Then we got wallet switching. Then we got so it's building step by step building blocks, and that's taken 2 years. For the last 2 years,
Wow.
we've been building on this. So
What does that
two
look
years
like in terms of adoption? Sorry.
I think there's a roughly around 50 million wallets out there, maybe 60 million wallets. So I've likened that to this. If you went back to 1998 and the number of browsers that were around at the time would be around 50 million, right? So you can imagine this is pre-Web 1.0 when there was 50 million browsers.
Mm.
And we're in that same position with digital wallets. We've got early adopter geeks. And people are beginning to now go, oh, that's cool. And they're telling their friends and they're telling their friends. But that hockey stick moment hasn't hit yet. Is it Joe Rogan saying he's going to use sats? Is it somebody else? Now, you asked me a question about X. When Jack Dorsey owned X, he actually had sats and a micropayment system built into Twitter. You
Wow.
can probably see it in some people's pages. They've got a dollar icon still. Now, I don't know if, that's been removed. But when you clicked it, it came up and said, how many sats would you like to pay for that tweet? And it was there. And Jack is a massive fan of crypto micropayments. And he was going to do that. But then
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
Elon Musk stuff came in, he sold it. And Elon, if you look at him, ignore all the hype and the hyperbole about him. He talks about Dogecoin, but his roots and why it's called X was the company before PayPal was called X. That was his company. And he has a track record in online payments. So he's not an idiot. I mean, he's a world's richest man. But what I mean by he's not an idiot is that he understands how online transactions occur. He understands how micropayments occur. I suspect that Elon might be one of the people that causes it to go mass market. If 300 million X users suddenly find they've got a wallet and it does micropayments, the learning curve has just jumped massively. Threads, for example, with Zuckerberg is looking at micropayments. Again, that's
Wow.
160 million people. So
That'll
somewhere
do
along the
it.
line,
Yeah.
yeah, those two might be the triggers. Or as I said, it's going to take a big, well-known named podcaster, if it was Joe Rogan, happy days, but it might not be Joe, but it might be someone equally well-known and goes, oh, by the way, I'm now using micropayments to get paid. I don't have ads and I don't have subscriptions. So if you want it, get a wallet and pay me in sats. And that's all it would take. And it would take that, and then that would get mass coverage and it get mass adoption. And then suddenly the snowball will roll. So
And do
somewhere
you,
along the line, something's going to happen.
yeah. Do you believe there's opportunity to be able to then create a utility that links those wallets from the social apps into something like TrueFans?
Yes. So we use a third-party wallet from a company called Olby.com, but they've created something called the wallet connector. So uh, going back again, there was 10 or 15 browsers, right? You could have picked Firefox, you could have picked Netscape, IE. I think there was a whole bunch of other ones that existed that have gone now, right? And so picking your browser was just like, I fancy this one today. I'll try that one today. Which one fits me best? Wallets are very much the same. And I think the only differentiator between wallets will be the fees that they charge for storing sats within them. A bit like having your bank. Why are you with bank X, not bank Y? Why are you with bank Z and not bank A, right? I don't know. Mum and dad always were with that bank, so I'll always bank with them. Or well, they gave me a 3% return on my credit card, right? So
Right.
I'm with them. So there will be moments where wallet providers are going to be trying to come after you to get you to use their wallet. there's a really, really good one in the US called Stripe, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and that allows you to put fiat dollars into your wallet and automatically pay for podcasts or music. And they do the transfer between fiat and sats for you. You don't have to
Wow.
even do it. And then if you are a podcast creator and if you've accumulated, let's say, 100,000 sats, one click and you can convert it back to fiat. So again, that simplicity of moving between one Bitcoin currency and moving back to fiat currencies is there now. And so,
That's
you know,
news.
yeah, a year ago that wasn't there. That didn't happen. On my platform, we now have one-click Apple Pay to Sats. So,
Wow.
so you're listening to this show, and we'll put a message up. Hey, Sam, your wallet's running a bit low. Do you want $499? And you put out whatever number in, click Apple Pay, bang, and we instantly put Sats into your wallet. Google Pay, Apple Pay, whatever. That wasn't there 3 weeks ago. You know, before you had to open a MoonPay account, do KYC, know your customer, give them the inside leg measurement, tell them who your girlfriend's middle name was, and then open up a bank account, right? And then if you still stuck with it, then you could do a fiat to sat transfer. And so most people went, nah, can't be bothered. So now we've literally got on the mobile app. I'm running out of cash. Put whatever amount in, click one pay, Apple Pay, just look at it with Face ID and the job's done. That's it. Not even 30 seconds.
This is definitely an exciting time. That's a huge development I was not aware of.
Yeah.
Is this part of what you're talking about with podcast standards and what you're working on?
Yeah. So what's happening is podcasting 1.0, let's call it that, was the basic RSS, name, title of podcast. And one of the things that we started to realize was that actually we wanted more metadata around the podcast. So we don't want to change the audio, we don't want to change the content, but actually we want to get better discoverability, some interactivity, and better monetization. So they're the three things we focus on. So what's discoverability? Well, there's a thing called the person tag. Hey, Philip, do you want to put your picture of you in your RSS feed, and then apps like TrueFans, Fountain, whatever, can show the listener, what does Philip look like? Oh, wow. Okay. Now I know what he looks like. So he's the host. Oh, well, I can have a picture of my guest as well, or co-host. So person tag is a feature that we've added. Transcriptions, which Apple just added, was in podcasting 2.0 about a year ago. Chapters, the ability to break down your podcast into segments if it's a long podcast. Funding tag, if you want to fund me, click this link and you can go and pay PayPal or whatever. So there's 27 features or tags, pick your word. I call them, they are technically called tags, but I call them features because that's much more friendly. And those features allow you to, improve the way it is. So we talked about what is a boost, right? The ability to make a comment with a micropayment. So, hey, I'm listening to this podcast halfway through. I want to have some interactivity with Philip. How do I do that today? Well, I don't know how I get hold of Philip, but now I can leave him a boost. Hey, Philip, love what you said, mate. That was amazing. Click, you get that boost, you read it, and then in the next show, you go, yeah, thanks a lot, John. You were listening to my show last week. I loved it. Yeah, thanks for the 1,000 stats. And yeah, I fully agree, whatever. So suddenly you've got some interactivity with your audience through the mechanisms of boosts. So again, if you want to find out more about it, there's something called the Podcast Standards Project, PSP. You can go online and it'll tell you a lot about it. There's also a really good page called podcasting2.org. And that tells you all the 27 tags and what they do and how they work and what you can do. So what's happening right now is hosts like Buzzsprout, like Blueberry, like RSS.com are adding these to the back end admin for their podcast creators. So who are you hosted with, Philip?
I run a few shows. Some are on Libsyn, of course. Others are on Buzzsprout, I believe.
Yep.
And then another might be on something called Omni, which is new to
Okay.
me.
Yeah. So let's take the Buzzsprout one. So you could go into Buzzsprout now and you could put a picture. They support the person tag. So you could put your picture in there. They support transcripts. They support chapters. So suddenly you could publish your RSS feed with all of those features added because they're part of what the host is now giving you.
Wow.
And me in as a listener in the new podcasting 2.0 apps, True Fans, Fountain, Podverse, then get to see those, so within the app itself, I get, the visual picture of Philip, I get the chapters, I get a transcript with word by word, follow along. There's all sorts of things, right? I get sound bites, I get clips. So all of these things add to the metadata of
Yeah.
discovery and interacting. They don't change. We're not asking you to do something like, you know, talk 10 times faster or talk deeper or whatever. That can be done by you in post-production, right? But that's your audio. I mean, one of the ones I'm most excited about is something called the alternative enclosure. So your primary enclosure in RSS is your audio, your MP3, your AAC. But imagine you want to provide alternative copies of that same one, maybe a low bit rate because you've got a big audience in maybe Africa where it's costly to download, or maybe you've got an audience who wants to have that super stereo, Dolby surround sound version, so they can switch that, or you've got a video version of your podcast because so many people have got a YouTube one now. So you might want to say, actually, you can listen to me while you're, out jogging or at the gym, but maybe you're sat at home and you want to switch. Click this button, the alternative enclosure, and we'll switch you to my video version. And we're working with Adobe right now, who have got a great translation tool. So they can take any like this audio and they could translate it into 126 languages.
My
So you
goodness.
might say, I want a version in Hindi and Chinese and one in German, one in French. So in the alternative closure, you just put the URLs of those translations. I'm now listening to you in English. I look down in the corner, there's a little button. I click it and up comes all the different languages. I click the one that I can speak, goes into German, and now I get the German translation of the text and I get a German version of this podcast.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And that's
So
all
these
included right there in any player that someone's using in the future.
exactly. And so these podcasting tags are being adopted rapidly. And I do mean rapidly by hosts. It's good because I think there's about 35, 40 posts, let's say. Competition is good. And they're all going, oh, well, if you've got that one, I've got this one, right? If you've got that, I'll add it as well. So we're beginning to see some real innovation where podcasting's been pretty stale for quite a long while. Unfortunately, Apple didn't do anything. They were good keepers of podcasting in what we call the Ice Age, but they never really evolved it. And
Yeah.
now the podcast standards project, plus all of the hosts and apps coming together under that project, I mean, to say these are the things that we are going to do to enhance podcasting 2.0. And the benefit to listeners is, there, and the benefit to creators is there. So, yeah, it's an exciting time to be a podcaster.
You brought up something super important. I want to make sure we get in here. I know
Mm.
we're running against time here, but you said something super important that you brought up as a question when you were speaking at the panel, and that was, why is it that people are willing to pay for music, for audiobooks, for movies, but then the minute we get to podcasting, suddenly it's got to be free? It's such a valid question, and the truth is, yeah, how would that destroy or change the industry were it to suddenly shift to that? Do you feel like it would create a massive shift? Because I think that's what most people were afraid of, especially creators. Forget about advertisers.
So the problem was that if you created music, well, you would remember maybe, there was Napster and LimeWire, and they
Yeah,
all
I
tried to get
remember those
free
days.
music, right? Okay. And then Steve Jobs came along and said 99p a track. And I went, you know what? I can't be bothered. I really can't be bothered to spend hours nicking music and trying to get music for free when 99p is fine, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like a subscription, give me 1,000 tracks, Spotify 14.99, listen to what you want, right? My children don't even know, that when I was growing up, because I'm much older than you, I'd get my one album and I'd wear it to death because that's my pocket money, and so, and then I'd get another album the next month and that would be and then the radio would be the only way I'd get new, fresh music, right? So, and to fast forward today, you can eat as much music as you want and it's cheap as chips. So The problem with podcasting is I think people just assume, yeah, all you need is you rock up, you put a mic, it's any two blokes talking, anyone can do it. Therefore, I'm not paying for it, right? It has no value because anyone can do this, as opposed to someone playing a guitar and actually singing, or somebody creating a film, or somebody reading an audio book, or somebody doing a course, right? There's perceived value in that. The bar to entry of doing those is a little bit higher. Therefore, actually, I'll pay you for those. But no, I'm not paying you just to sit behind a mic and yabba and talk about whatever, because anyone can do that. And we all know that this isn't the hard part. The hard part's when I stop talking and you have to edit this. The hard part is when you have to promote this. The hard part is when you have to then try and clip it and try and get the right words out there and try and get an audience. So the perception is wrong that podcasting is just, two people on a mic, very simple, no problem. And it's the reality is when people do it, they realize how, challenging it can be. And then when you get to, properly produced, high quality podcasts that, big companies are doing, there's a big cost behind them. But still the perception is that podcasting is the poor man of digital content because it's the one that we don't want to put value. Now, this could change tomorrow. Let's say suddenly Apple, totally left field, said, you know what? It's 99p for every podcast, just like it is music. Wow. We'd see a massive drop off in the consumption to begin with, but then we'd see a higher quality of content, and we would see also a higher consumption around the narrower focus of podcasts. But you'd still get those podcasts who say, look, I don't want 99p, I'll go somewhere else and I'll put it for free. So you're always going to get somebody who does that. And so that's why I think, we won't change that perception around podcasting. But what we can do is get your fans and people who really want to hear you and support you and give you value to give you micropayments. So it's not massive. It's not going to break their bank, but enough for them to say, 20, 30 cents. Hey, there you go, Philip. I think you were brilliant. I'm going to keep supporting you this way. Or maybe 50 cents, go and splash out, give me $1, but that's the way it will go. That's the way it will go.
This is incredible. Again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to really painstakingly break it down for me, because some of these things you didn't get the chance to say at the panel that I thought would have really made others sit down and contemplate what they were trying to promote at that panel. And for me, it was a very powerful opportunity to hear straight from someone who's watched the game evolve and is still deeply involved and totally evangelizing the industry as a whole. So I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Where do you want the listeners to go connect with you, and what do you want them to know?
So 3 places, if you don't mind. First of all, I do Pod News with James Cridland. So please go, and if you want to keep up to date with the industry, James has a daily podcast, 3 minutes long, daily newsletter, and James and I do a weekly one where we do what we're doing now, Philip. We analyze the industry. We talk about some of the goods and the bads. So check that one out. My app, truefans.fm, give it a go, try it. It's a progressive web app. It's not an iOS app. It's not an Android app. Why? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to pay Apple 30% for the microtransaction payments. So that's the first one. But I'm a massive advocate of the open web, and I'm on a little bit of a jihad at the moment. Steve Jobs said he hated Flash. If you remember the Flash operating system
Yeah.
and the Flash Pro. Well, Apple have invented Flash, but Flash 2, and Flash 2 is iOS. It's proprietary to one platform. It's proprietary with Swift. It hasn't got any SEO in it because it's a locked environment. And Apple determine whether you can be in their store or not. And if they don't like you, they'll kick you out. And every feature change that you make in your app, Apple has to approve. That is crazy. That is Flash 2, and Apple has created it and convinced everyone that the only way on an iPhone to have an application is to go to the iStore and pay the Apple tax. And so I will not do that. So progressive web apps are open web standards, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They're cross-platform. They grow and shrink to the size of your screen. So only one code base that I have to work with. And they do everything else that an app can do. So, Apple, what you have to do is go and look at truefans.fm in a browser, Safari or Chrome on your phone, will then pop up a little screen that says, here's how you add the icon and install the app. You do add to home screen and boom, that's it, you're done, right? We're not in the App Store. Now, Apple could have said, instead of add to home screen, they could have said install app. But they realized if they use those words, people would do that. So they tried to make out that it was just adding a little icon to your homepage. But we get push notifications, we get micro payments, we get transactions, we get everything that
Wow.
a fully blown iOS app does. But we don't have to be in the App Store. We don't have to wait for Apple to approve every change we make to the app. So me and my team, we make daily changes and we can push them instantly. So there's a lot of benefits. And then the third one, I just simply say, please go and have a look at the Podcast Standards Project, PSP. See the companies that are involved, understand what this movement is and how it's being evolved very rapidly. And yeah, get involved.
Sam, you have been a treasure trove of knowledge, and I'm sure we didn't even get into everything you could have spoken about. It's clear to me that you've been watching this industry for some time now, and that you want to see it grow. That's a statement you made yourself. So, where your heart is, and I always believe that a person's character and where their heart is and what they're trying to accomplish and the reasons driving what they're doing are more important than what they may be doing. And I see that in you and I feel it when you speak.
Thank you.
So I really appreciate everything that you've taken the time to share with us today. I'm sure many who are listening, who are small business owners and entrepreneurs who have contemplated the idea of a podcast, have maybe been a guest on a podcast, haven't really grasped just what the other side of the table may look like. And this is probably the clearest picture anyone could have painted. And I appreciate you taking the time to do that with me here today.
Philip, thanks for inviting me, mate. Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure.